Maya Chun had perfected the art of being invisible. At 28, she moved through the gleaming corridors of Sterling Tech like a shadow, her footsteps silent on the polished marble floors. Every morning at exactly 6:45 a.m., she would slip through the employee entrance, avoiding the main lobby where executives gathered for their power meetings. Her black hair was always pulled back in a simple ponytail, her clothes carefully chosen to blend into the background: navy blazers, gray slacks, nothing that would draw attention. The accounting department on the 15th floor was her sanctuary, tucked away in a corner cubicle behind a maze of filing cabinets. Maya had created her own little world. Her desk was meticulously organized, with neat stacks of financial reports, a small succulent plant that somehow thrived under fluorescent lights, and a photo of her grandmother who had raised her after her parents died in a car accident when she was 12. Maya's colleagues barely knew she existed. During lunch breaks, while others gathered in the bright cafeteria sharing stories and gossip, she would eat her homemade sandwich at her desk, working through complex budget analyses that would have taken others hours to complete. When the company held its monthly all-hands meetings, Maya would slip into the back row, invisible among the hundreds of employees who packed the auditorium. But Maya saw everything. From her quiet corner, she noticed patterns that others missed. She watched as departments overspent their budgets while claiming financial constraints. She observed how certain managers took credit for their team's work during presentations. Most importantly, she discovered a series of irregularities in the company's vendor payments that suggested someone was systematically skimming money from Sterling Tech's accounts. The discovery happened on a rainy Tuesday evening in October. Maya was working late again, long after her colleagues had gone home to their families and dinner plans. The office was eerily quiet except for the gentle hum of computers and the distant sound of the cleaning crew's vacuum. She was reviewing quarterly expense reports when she noticed something odd in the payment records for office supplies. Sterling Tech was paying the same vendor, Pinnacle Office Solutions, unusually large amounts for basic items. A single order for printer paper cost 3 times the market rate. Cleaning supplies were being billed at premium prices typically reserved for specialized industrial chemicals. At first, Maya thought it might be a data entry error, but as she dug deeper, she found a pattern spanning over 18 months. Maya's heart raced as she uncovered more evidence. The invoices looked legitimate at first glance, but the amounts were consistently inflated. Someone had been very clever about keeping the overcharges below the threshold that would trigger automatic auditing procedures. Over the past year and a half, Sterling Tech had overpaid Pinnacle Office Solutions by approximately $2.3 million. She traced the approval signatures and found that all the suspicious invoices had been processed by the same person, Derek Morrison, the vice president of operations. Derek was one of Sterling Tech's golden boys, a charming executive who had joined the company 5 years ago and quickly climbed the corporate ladder. He had a corner office on the 20th floor, drove a Tesla, and was known for his expensive suits and confident smile. Maya spent the next 3 weeks carefully documenting everything. She worked even later into the evenings, printing copies of invoices, cross-referencing bank statements, and building an airtight case. Her grandmother's voice echoed in her mind, reminding her of the importance of doing the right thing even when it was difficult. Integrity is not about being perfect, Maya, her grandmother used to say. It's about being honest even when no one is watching. The question that kept Maya awake at night was what to do with this information. She could take it to her direct supervisor, Janet Mills, but Janet was notorious for avoiding anything that might create waves. Maya had seen her bury uncomfortable reports before, claiming they needed additional verification before moving forward. The thought of her discovery disappearing into Janet's filing cabinet made Maya's stomach turn. She could go to HR, but the Human Resources Department at Sterling Tech was more focused on protecting the company from lawsuits than investigating potential wrongdoing by executives. Maya had heard whispers about previous complaints against management that had mysteriously vanished, with the complainants finding themselves reassigned to less desirable positions or encouraged to seek opportunities elsewhere. There was also the possibility of going directly to Derek Morrison himself, but Maya knew that would be professional suicide. Derek had enough influence in the company to make her life miserable, and Without solid backing from senior management, her accusations would likely be dismissed as the jealous ramblings of a disgruntled employee. Maya's research led her to one conclusion. She needed to take this directly to the top. But the top at Sterling Tech was Alexander Sterling himself, the company's founder and CEO. Alexander Sterling was a legend in the tech industry, a brilliant entrepreneur who had built his company from a small startup in his garage to a multinational corporation employing over 50,000 people worldwide. The problem was that Alexander Sterling might as well have been living on another planet as far as Maya was concerned. He occupied the entire 40th floor of the building, surrounded by layers of assistants, security, and executives who controlled access to him, like medieval gatekeepers protecting a king. Maya had seen him exactly twice in her 3 years at the company, both times from a distance during company-wide presentations where he appeared on stage like a distant figure addressing his subjects. Maya spent sleepless nights weighing her options. She could remain silent, keep her head down, and continue her invisible existence while knowing that someone was stealing from the company. The safe choice would be to pretend she had never discovered the irregularities and go back to her routine of processing invoices without questioning their accuracy. But her grandmother's lessons wouldn't let her rest. Maya remembered the stories her grandmother had told her about working as a seamstress in a factory where the owner was cheating his employees out of their wages. Her grandmother had been the one to organize the workers and demand fair treatment, even though it meant risking her job and facing threats from the management. Sometimes, Maya, her grandmother had said during one of their evening conversations, being invisible gives you power. People don't notice you watching, so you see things they think are hidden. But with that knowledge comes responsibility. Maya realized that her invisibility, which she had always seen as a weakness, might actually be her greatest strength. For 3 years, she had moved through Sterling Tech unnoticed, building a reputation as a reliable but unremarkable employee. No one would suspect her of causing trouble or seeking attention. She was the perfect person to expose the truth because no one would see it coming. The decision crystallized on a Friday afternoon as Maya watched Derek Morrison walk through the accounting department, shaking hands and making small talk with her colleagues. He stopped by several cubicles, asking about weekend plans and complimenting people on their work. When he passed Maya's desk, his eyes slid over her as if she were part of the furniture. His dismissive glance confirmed what she already knew. In Derek's mind, she was nobody important. That evening, Maya sat in her small apartment, surrounded by copies of the evidence she had gathered. The papers covered her kitchen table like pieces of a jigsaw puzzle that revealed a picture of systematic theft. She had bank statements showing the inflated payments, email chains approving the suspicious invoices, and a detailed timeline of the fraud spanning 18 months. Maya opened her laptop and began typing an email to Alexander Sterling. She had researched his assistant's contact information and found that all executive communications were filtered through a woman named Patricia Webb, who had been with the company for over 15 years. Maya knew that Patricia received hundreds of emails daily, most of which never made it to Alexander Sterling's attention. But Maya had an advantage that other employees didn't. She understood numbers, patterns, and how to present financial information in a way that would immediately grab attention. Her email would need to be concise, professional, and compelling enough to make Patricia Webb stop in her tracks. Maya started writing and rewriting the email, crafting each sentence carefully. She knew she would have only one chance to make her case, and if she failed to communicate the severity of the situation, her evidence would likely be ignored or passed down to lower-level managers who might bury it. As she worked on the email, Maya thought about her life at Sterling Tech and how it might change after she sent this message. If her allegations were taken seriously, she would inevitably become visible in a company where she had spent years perfecting the art of being overlooked. The thought terrified and excited her in equal measure. Maya had always believed that her invisibility was a form of protection. Growing up as an orphan, she had learned to avoid drawing attention to herself as a survival mechanism. In school, she had been the quiet student who always did her homework, but never raised her hand. In college, she had been the dedicated study partner who helped others succeed while staying in the background herself. At Sterling Tech, this pattern had continued. Maya excelled at her work, but never promoted herself or sought recognition. She had been passed over for promotions multiple times, watching as less qualified but more vocal colleagues advance to senior positions. Each time, Maya had told herself that she preferred the stability of her current role, but deep down, she knew that fear held her back. Monday morning arrived with unusual intensity for Maya Chun. She sat at her desk, performing her regular tasks with mechanical precision while her mind raced with thoughts about the email she had sent 3 days ago. Every time her computer chimed with a new message, her heart skipped a beat. But none of the emails were from Patricia Webb or anyone in Alexander Sterling's office. Maya had researched Patricia Webb extensively over the weekend. She discovered that Patricia had started as a secretary when Sterling Tech was still a small company and had grown into one of the most powerful people in the organization. She was known for her loyalty to Alexander Sterling and her ability to protect his time by filtering out unnecessary communications. Maya knew that if Patricia deemed her email unworthy of the CEO's attention, it would simply disappear into the corporate void. By Tuesday afternoon, Maya began to wonder if her email had been lost in the digital shuffle. She considered sending a follow-up message, but decided against it, knowing that persistent communications from unknown employees might be viewed as harassment rather than legitimate concern. Wednesday brought an unexpected development. During her lunch break, Maya overheard 2 executives talking in hushed tones near the elevator bank. They were discussing irregularities in vendor payments and mentioned that someone from the CEO's office was asking questions about procurement procedures. Maya's pulse quickened as she realized that her email might have reached its intended destination. The confirmation came Thursday morning in a way Maya had never anticipated. She was reviewing monthly expense reports when her phone rang. The caller ID showed an internal extension she didn't recognize, and the voice on the other end was crisp and professional. "Miss Chun, this is Patricia Webb from Mr. Sterling's office. Mr. Sterling would like to meet with you today at 4 o'clock. Please come to the 40th floor reception area 10 minutes early." Maya's hand trembled as she hung up the phone. In 3 years at Sterling Tech, she had never received a phone call from an executive assistant, let alone one from the CEO's office. Her colleagues were too focused on their own work to notice her shock, but Maya felt as if everyone in the office must be able to hear her heart pounding. The rest of the day passed in a blur. Maya tried to concentrate on her regular duties, but her mind kept drifting to the upcoming meeting. She had no idea what to expect from Alexander Sterling or how he would react to her allegations against one of his vice presidents. Maya had heard stories about Sterling's legendary temper and his reputation for making quick, decisive judgments about people. She worried that he might view her accusations as the work of a troublemaker seeking attention. At 3:45, Maya took the elevator to the 40th floor for the first time in her Sterling Tech career. The executive level was a different world from the cramped cubicles and fluorescent lighting of the accounting department. The walls were lined with expensive artwork, the furniture was modern and sleek, and everything seemed to gleam with success and power. Patricia Webb was exactly what Maya had expected, a woman in her 50s with silver hair, wearing a perfectly tailored suit and exuding the kind of confidence that came from years of wielding authority. She looked up from her computer as Maya approached the reception desk. "Miss Chen, please have a seat. Mr. Sterling is finishing up a conference call, and he'll see you shortly." Maya sat in one of the leather chairs in the waiting area, trying to calm her nerves. She had brought a folder containing additional copies of her evidence, though she wasn't sure if she would need them. The minutes ticked by slowly, and Maya found herself studying the corporate awards and framed photographs that decorated Patricia's office area. At exactly 4 o'clock, Patricia stood up and walked toward a set of double doors that Maya assumed led to Alexander Sterling's private office. "Mr. Sterling will see you now." Maya followed Patricia into the most impressive office she had ever seen. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of the city, and the space was furnished with what appeared to be museum-quality pieces. Behind a massive mahogany desk sat Alexander Sterling, and Maya was surprised by how different he looked from the distant figure she had seen during company presentations. Alexander Sterling was in his early 50s, with graying hair and intense blue eyes that seemed to take in every detail. He was wearing a simple white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, and There was an air of focused energy about him that Maya found both intimidating and impressive. When he looked up from the documents spread across his desk, Maya recognized copies of the evidence she had included with her email. "Miss Chun, please sit down." His voice was calm, but carried an undertone of urgency. "I've been reviewing the information you sent me, and I have some questions." Maya took a seat across from his desk, her folder clutched in her hands. She had rehearsed what she might say during this meeting. But now that she was face to face with the most powerful person in the company, her prepared words seemed inadequate. "First," Alexander continued, "I want you to know that I take allegations of this nature very seriously. The evidence you've provided suggests a significant breach of trust by someone in a position of authority. Before we proceed, I need to understand how you discovered these irregularities." Maya found her voice and began explaining her work routine, how she had noticed the unusual payment patterns, and the weeks she had spent verifying her suspicions. As she spoke, Alexander listened intently, occasionally asking for clarification about specific invoices or payment procedures. Maya was surprised by how detailed his questions were. Clearly, Alexander Sterling understood the financial operations of his company far better than she had expected. "You've been very thorough," Alexander said after Maya finished her explanation. "This level of analysis would typically be performed by our internal audit team, not by someone in accounts payable. What motivated you to investigate so extensively?" Maya hesitated, unsure how to explain her sense of moral obligation without sounding self-righteous. "I've always believed that details matter," she said finally. "When numbers don't add up, there's usually a reason. I couldn't ignore what I was seeing." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "How long have you been with Sterling Tech, Miss Chun?" 3 years in January, sir." "And, in those 3 years, have you reported concerns like this before?" "No, sir. This is the first time I've discovered anything irregular." "But, you went directly to me rather than following the normal chain of command." "What?" Maya took a deep breath. This was the question she had been dreading, because answering honestly meant criticizing the company's internal processes and potentially burning bridges with her immediate supervisors. "I was concerned that the information might not reach the appropriate level if I followed standard procedures," Maya said carefully. The amounts involved seemed significant enough to warrant immediate attention from senior leadership. Alexander's expression remained neutral, but Maya caught a flicker of something in his eyes that might have been approval. "You realize that your allegations, if proven true, could result in criminal charges against Derek Morrison?" "Yes, sir. I understand the seriousness of the situation. And you're prepared to stand behind your evidence, even if it means testifying in legal proceedings?" Maya's mouth went dry, but she nodded. "Yes, sir. The evidence speaks for itself." Alexander stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the city skyline. For several minutes, the office was silent except for the distant hum of traffic far below. Maya waited, uncertain whether she should say something or remain quiet. Finally, Alexander turned back to face her. "Miss Chun, in my experience, there are 2 types of people in corporate America. There are those who see problems and look the other way, hoping someone else will deal with them. And there are those who see problems and feel compelled to act, regardless of the personal cost. You clearly fall into the second category." Maya wasn't sure if this was a compliment or a warning. "The investigation into these allegations will begin immediately," Alexander continued. "I'm bringing in our external auditors and involving legal counsel. This means the matter will no longer be confidential, and there may be consequences for everyone involved, including you." "Consequences for me?" Maya asked. "Derek Morrison is well-liked in this company. He has supporters who may view your allegations as an attack on a respected colleague. There may be attempts to discredit you or question your motives. Are you prepared for that?" Maya thought about her grandmother and the courage it had taken for her to stand up against unfair treatment. "I'm prepared to face whatever comes, sir." Alexander returned to his desk and picked up one of the invoices Maya had flagged. This invoice shows a payment of $47,000 for office furniture maintenance. "Do you have any idea what that might refer to?" "I searched our asset management system, sir. We have no record of office furniture that would require that level of maintenance. Based on the vendor's supposed specialty, it should have been for basic cleaning supplies. And this pattern repeats across multiple invoices over 18 months?" "Yes, sir. The amounts vary, but they're consistently inflated compared to market rates for the actual services or products. Alexander made some notes on a legal pad. Miss Chun, I want you to work directly with our external auditors when they arrive. You'll be temporarily reassigned from your current duties to assist with this investigation. This means you'll be working on the 38th floor with our special projects team. Maya felt a rush of excitement mixed with terror. A temporary reassignment to work with external auditors was far beyond anything she had ever imagined for her career at Sterling Tech. There's one more thing, Alexander said, his voice taking on a more serious tone. Until this investigation is complete, I don't want you discussing these matters with anyone except the auditors and myself. Derek Morrison cannot know that he's under investigation until we've gathered all the evidence we need. I understand, sir. Patricia will provide you with details about your new temporary assignment. You'll start Monday morning. As Maya prepared to leave, Alexander called her name. Miss Chun, may I ask why you've remained in accounts payable for 3 years? Your analytical skills suggest you're capable of much more challenging work. Maya paused, realizing this was the first time anyone at Sterling Tech had asked about her career aspirations. I suppose I've always preferred to work behind the scenes, sir. I'm not particularly comfortable with attention. That may have served you well in the past, Alexander said with a slight smile. But I suspect your days of working behind the scenes are coming to an end. Maya left Alexander Sterling's office with her mind reeling. In the span of 1 hour, her entire career trajectory had changed. She was no longer just Maya Chun from accounting. She was a key witness in a major corporate investigation. The thought both thrilled and terrified her. Over the weekend, Maya tried to process what had happened and prepare for her new assignment. She researched the external auditing firm that Sterling Tech typically used and read about corporate fraud investigations. She also spent time thinking about Derek Morrison and how he would react when he eventually learned that she was responsible for exposing his scheme. Monday morning brought Maya to the 38th floor, where she met the team of external auditors who would be investigating her allegations. The lead auditor was a woman named Sarah Martinez, who had extensive experience in corporate fraud cases. Sarah was impressed by the thoroughness of Maya's initial investigation and explained that Maya's work had given them an excellent starting point. Most fraud cases begin with suspicions or anonymous tips, Sarah explained. It's rare to have someone present us with this level of documented evidence right from the beginning. Maya spent the next several days working closely with the audit team, helping them understand Sterling Tech's payment systems and identifying additional areas where irregularities might exist. She discovered that her analytical skills were far more valuable than she had ever realized, and for the first time in her career, she felt like her contributions were being truly appreciated. The investigation expanded as the auditors uncovered evidence that Derek Morrison's fraud extended beyond the inflated vendor payments. They found indications of kickback schemes, falsified expense reports, and unauthorized bonuses that Derek had approved for himself. The total amount of the theft was approaching $3.5 million, significantly more than Maya's initial estimate. The moment Maya had been dreading arrived on a Thursday morning in November. She was working with the audit team in their temporary conference room when Patricia Webb appeared in the doorway, her expression more serious than Maya had ever seen it. Miss Chen, Mr. Sterling needs to see you immediately. Please bring any materials you're currently working on. Maya gathered her files and followed Patricia to the elevator, her stomach churning with anxiety. She had been working with the auditors for 2 weeks, and they had built an overwhelming case against Derek Morrison. The evidence now included bank records, email communications, and testimony from vendors who admitted to participating in the kickback scheme. Maya knew that the investigation was reaching its conclusion, which meant Derek Morrison would soon learn the truth about who had exposed him. When Maya entered Alexander Sterling's office, she found him standing near his windows with his back to the door. His posture was tense, and she could sense the gravity of whatever had prompted this urgent meeting. Miss Chun, please sit down. We have a problem. Maya took her usual seat across from his desk, clutching her files. Alexander turned to face her, and she could see anger and disappointment in his expression. Derek Morrison knows about the investigation, Alexander said without preamble. Someone leaked information to him, and He's threatening to claim that you fabricated evidence against him in an attempt to frame him. Maya felt the blood drain from her face. That's not true, sir. Everything I provided was documented directly from our own systems. I believe you, Alexander said, sitting down at his desk. But Derek is claiming that you've been falsifying records for months, and he's hired an attorney who specializes in defending against corporate fraud allegations. They're preparing to argue that you're a disgruntled employee who created false evidence to destroy Derek's reputation. Maya's hands began to shake. She had known there would be risks involved in coming forward, but she hadn't anticipated being accused of the very crime she had exposed. Sir, the external auditors have verified everything. They've confirmed that the invoices are real and that the payments were actually made. How can Derek claim I fabricated anything? His attorney is arguing that you had access to the payment systems and could have created false records to support your accusations. They're also claiming that your motive was revenge because Derek had supposedly rejected your romantic advances. Maya stood up abruptly, her face flushing with anger and humiliation. That's completely false. I've barely spoken to Derek Morrison in 3 years. He doesn't even know I exist. I know it's false, Alexander said calmly. But Derek's attorney is very good at creating reasonable doubt, and they're going to argue that a lonely, overlooked employee might fabricate a conspiracy to get revenge against a successful executive who spurned her advances. Maya began pacing in front of Alexander's desk, her mind racing. She realized that her years of invisibility, which had allowed her to discover the fraud, were now being used as weapons against her credibility. What does this mean for the investigation? Maya asked. It means we need ironclad proof that goes beyond your initial discoveries. The auditors are working around the clock to gather additional evidence that Derek couldn't claim you fabricated. We need bank records from the vendors, testimony from Derek's co-conspirators, and documentation that proves the fraud existed before you ever raised concerns about it. Alexander picked up a thick folder from his desk. There's something else you need to know. Derek has filed a counter-complaint with HR, claiming that you've been harassing him and making false accusations. He's demanding that you be terminated for misconduct. Maya sank back into her chair, overwhelmed by the sudden reversal of her situation. 3 weeks ago, she had been an invisible employee with a solid reputation for reliability and accuracy. Now she was being portrayed as a vindictive woman who had fabricated evidence against an innocent executive. Miss Chun, Alexander said, his voice softer now. I want you to know that I completely support you in this matter. The evidence you brought to me was compelling and professionally presented. The external audit has confirmed the fundamental accuracy of your findings. But I also need you to understand that this situation is about to become very difficult for you personally. What do you mean? Derek's attorney is going to try to destroy your credibility by any means necessary. They'll examine every aspect of your personal and professional life looking for ammunition they can use against you. They'll question your mental health, your motivation, and your competence. This is going to be a brutal process. Maya thought about her quiet life, her small apartment, her routine of working late and eating lunch alone at her desk. She realized that her invisibility, which she had always seen as protection, had also left her isolated and vulnerable. Sir, I don't understand why Derek is fighting this so aggressively. The evidence against him is overwhelming. Why doesn't he just accept responsibility and try to negotiate a settlement? Alexander smiled grimly. Because Derek Morrison is a narcissist who believes his own lies. He's convinced himself that he's the victim in this situation, and he's genuinely outraged that someone he considers beneath his notice has threatened his position. What happens now? Now we fight. The investigation continues, but it's no longer just about proving Derek's guilt. We also have to prove your innocence and credibility. The external auditors are bringing in additional specialists who can verify the authenticity of all the evidence. We're also hiring a forensic accountant who can trace the money trail back to its source. Alexander stood up and walked around to the front of his desk, sitting on the edge so he was closer to Maya's eye level. I need to ask you something, and I want you to think carefully before you answer. Are you prepared to see this through to the end, even if it means testifying in court, having your personal life scrutinized, and possibly facing months of legal proceedings? Maya thought about her grandmother and the courage it had taken for her to stand up for what was right. She thought about the principles that had guided her through her life, and the importance of integrity even when facing adversity. Yes, sir. I'm prepared to see this through. Good, because I have something else to tell you. Sterling Tech is going to provide you with legal representation, and we're prepared to take Derek Morrison to court if necessary. But, more importantly, I want to offer you a permanent position as senior financial analyst in our corporate compliance division. Maya stared at Alexander, unsure she had heard correctly. Sir, your work on this investigation has demonstrated analytical skills and attention to detail that we desperately need in our compliance team. The position comes with a 40% salary increase and the responsibility for developing systems to prevent the kind of fraud that Derek perpetrated. Maya felt tears forming in her eyes. 3 weeks ago, she had been an invisible employee stuck in a dead-end job. Now the CEO of Sterling Tech was offering her a promotion and the chance to make a real difference in preventing corporate fraud. There's one condition, Alexander added. The offer is contingent on our successfully resolving the current situation. If Derek's attorney somehow succeeds in discrediting you or the evidence, the job offer will be withdrawn. Maya nodded, understanding the stakes involved. I accept the position, sir, assuming we can prove the truth about Derek's actions. Over the next several weeks, Maya's life was transformed in ways she had never imagined. The external auditors expanded their investigation and uncovered additional evidence of Derek's fraud, including communications with vendors that clearly showed his involvement in the kickback schemes. They also discovered that Derek had been using company credit cards for personal expenses and had falsified his expense reports for over 2 years. Maya worked closely with Sterling Tech's legal team, preparing for the possibility that Derek might force the matter to court rather than accept termination and criminal charges. She found herself in meetings with high-powered attorneys, forensic accountants, and corporate executives who valued her insights and treated her as an equal. The transformation in how people treated Maya was remarkable. Colleagues who had ignored her for 3 years now approached her with respect and curiosity. Word had spread throughout the company about her role in exposing Derek Morrison, and Maya discovered that she had become something of a celebrity among the rank-and-file employees who had always suspected that executives were getting away with behavior that would get regular employees fired. The final confrontation with Derek Morrison came in December, in a conference room on the 39th floor. Derek sat across a large table with his attorney, while Maya sat with Sterling Tech's legal team and Alexander Sterling. The meeting had been arranged as a final attempt to reach a settlement before the matter went to court. Derek looked different from the confident executive Maya had observed for 3 years. His expensive suit couldn't hide the stressed lines around his eyes, and his usual charming smile had been replaced by a defensive scowl. When he looked at Maya, she saw a mixture of hatred and disbelief, as if he couldn't accept that someone he had never noticed could bring down his career. Derek's attorney presented their position first, arguing that Maya's allegations were baseless and motivated by personal animosity. He claimed that Derek was the victim of a conspiracy orchestrated by disgruntled employees who resented his success. When Sterling Tech's attorney presented their evidence, the room fell silent. Bank records showed millions of dollars flowing from Sterling Tech to shell companies controlled by Derek. Email communications revealed detailed discussions about inflating invoices and splitting the profits. Vendor testimony confirmed that Derek had demanded kickbacks in exchange for approving fraudulent invoices. As the evidence was presented, Maya watched Derek's face cycle through denial, anger, and, finally, resignation. His attorney whispered urgently in his ear, but Derek seemed to have stopped listening. Finally, Alexander Sterling spoke directly to Derek. You have 2 choices. You can accept termination, agree to repay the stolen funds, and cooperate with law enforcement in hopes of receiving a reduced sentence. Or we can pursue this matter in court, where you'll face the full weight of criminal prosecution and civil liability. Derek Morrison looked around the room, his eyes finally settling on Maya. I can't believe this is happening because of her, he said, his voice filled with contempt. 3 years I walked past that desk, and I never even knew her name. That's exactly why it's happening because of her, Alexander replied. Maya Chin has more integrity in her little finger than you've shown in your entire career. While you were stealing from this company, she was doing her job with dedication and honesty. Your biggest mistake was underestimating someone you considered beneath your notice. Derek's attorney advised him to accept the settlement offer, and after an hour of private consultation, Derek agreed to resign immediately, repay $3.5 million to Sterling Tech, and cooperate with the district attorney's office. In return, Sterling Tech agreed not to pursue civil damages beyond the stolen funds. Maya watched as Derek Morrison signed the papers that ended his career at Sterling Tech. When he stood up to leave, he paused near Maya's chair and looked down at her with a mixture of hatred and grudging respect. "You destroyed my life," Derek said quietly. Maya looked up at him calmly. "No, Derek. You destroyed your own life. I just made sure the truth came to light." After Derek and his attorney left, Alexander Sterling turned to Maya with a smile. "Miss Chun, congratulations on your new position as Senior Financial Analyst. You start Monday morning." Maya's first day in corporate compliance was unlike anything she had experienced at Sterling Tech. Instead of a cubicle hidden behind filing cabinets, she had an office with windows overlooking the city. Instead of working in isolation, she was part of a team of professionals who valued her expertise and sought her input on important decisions. Her new responsibilities included developing fraud detection systems, training employees on financial ethics, and working with external auditors to ensure Sterling Tech's compliance with all relevant regulations. Maya discovered that her years of quiet observation had given her unique insights into how corporate fraud could be hidden in plain sight. 6 months later, Maya stood in the main auditorium addressing a company-wide meeting about financial ethics and fraud prevention. Looking out at the hundreds of employees in attendance, she saw faces that reflected curiosity, respect, and admiration. Many of these same people had walked past her desk for 3 years without acknowledging her existence. Maya began her presentation by telling her story, explaining how her discovery of irregular vendor payments had led to the exposure of a major fraud scheme. She talked about the importance of speaking up when something didn't seem right, even when it meant taking personal risks. "For 3 years, I was invisible in this company," Maya said, looking directly at Alexander Sterling in the front row. "I thought invisibility was safety, but I learned that sometimes being invisible gives you a unique perspective on what others might miss. Each of you has the power to protect Sterling Tech's integrity by paying attention to the details and having the courage to ask questions when something doesn't add up." After her presentation, Maya was approached by dozens of employees who thanked her for her courage and shared their own concerns about questionable practices they had observed. Maya realized that her decision to speak up had not only exposed Derek Morrison's fraud, but had also created a culture where other employees felt empowered to raise concerns about potential wrongdoing. Alexander Sterling found Maya after the meeting ended. "That was an excellent presentation," he said. "You've come a long way from the invisible woman in accounting." Maya smiled, thinking about her grandmother and the lessons she had taught about integrity and courage. "I'm still the same person, Mr. Sterling. I just learned that being invisible isn't the same as being powerless." "No," Alexander agreed. "It certainly isn't. And, Maya, I want you to know that Sterling Tech is a better company because you had the courage to step out of the shadows." As Maya walked through the corridors of Sterling Tech that evening, she reflected on how much her life had changed. She was no longer invisible, but she had discovered something even more valuable than safety in anonymity. She had found her voice, her purpose, and her place in a company that now valued her contributions and respected her integrity. Maya Chun had spent years perfecting the art of being invisible, but she had learned that sometimes the most important thing you can do is make yourself seen. The truth she had uncovered had not only brought down a corrupt executive, but had also revealed her own strength and potential. Her journey from invisibility to recognition had taught her that real power comes not from hiding in the shadows, but from having the courage to step into the light when it matters most. That evening, Maya sat in her new office overlooking the city, working on fraud prevention protocols that would protect Sterling Tech and its employees from future corruption. She was no longer the invisible woman eating lunch alone at her desk. She was Maya Chun, Senior Financial Analyst, guardian of corporate integrity, and living proof that sometimes the most powerful person in the room is the one nobody notices until they choose to speak. As word of the investigation began to spread through the company's executive ranks, Maya noticed subtle changes in how people treated her. Some colleagues who had barely acknowledged her existence now watched her with curiosity and suspicion. Others seemed nervous when she passed their desks, as if they worried she might be investigating them as well. Derek Morrison, meanwhile, remained unaware that he was under investigation. Maya observed him from a distance during company meetings, wondering what he would do when he finally learned the truth. She knew that confrontation was inevitable, and she steeled herself for the moment when her invisible existence would be completely shattered by the consequences of her decision to speak up. The investigation was entering its final phase, and Maya realized that everything she had known about herself and her place in the corporate world was about to change forever. Now, faced with evidence of serious wrongdoing, Maya realized that remaining invisible was no longer an option. The knowledge she possessed came with a moral obligation to act, even if it meant stepping out of the shadows and risking everything she had built at Sterling Tech. Maya finished her email at 2 in the morning. It was exactly 3 paragraphs long, presenting the essential facts without unnecessary detail. She attached a summary of her findings, including copies of the most damning invoices and a calculation showing the total amount stolen. Before hitting send, she read the email one final time, knowing that these words would change her life forever. The subject line read, "Urgent. Evidence of vendor fraud, $2.3 million loss." Maya took a deep breath, moved her cursor to the send button, and clicked. The email disappeared into cyberspace, carrying with it 3 years of careful observations and the hope that someone in power would finally take notice of the woman who had perfected the art of being invisible. Maya closed her laptop and sat in the darkness of her apartment, listening to the sound of rain against her windows. Tomorrow, she would return to Sterling Tech and resume her quiet routine, but everything had changed. The email was out there, carrying her voice into the highest levels of the company where decisions were made and careers were built or destroyed. For the first time in years, Maya Chun was no longer invisible. She had chosen to step into the light, armed with nothing but the truth and the hope that integrity still mattered in the corporate world. As she finally fell asleep that night, Maya dreamed of her grandmother's proud smile and the possibility that being seen might not be as terrifying as she had always believed. The next phase of Maya's journey would test everything she thought she knew about herself, about justice, and about the price of speaking truth to power in a world where being invisible had always been her greatest protection.